those that have been set aside. When the authors are ready, I would go back to them. But for this morning, we're going to start off with Bill number 117-32, and I recognize the primary author, Senator Tina Rose Muñoz Barnes.
Si Diyos masi, Madam Speaker, then manana si Diyos. I'd like to move Bill number 117-32 COR to the third reading, and if I can speak on it, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, Senator, you may proceed.
Okay. Madam Speaker, and good morning to my colleagues. Bill 117-32 COR, as introduced by myself, you, Speaker Wanthat, and Senator Brant McCready, is an act to amend sections 3705 and 3707 of Article 7, Chapter 3, Title 16, GCA, relative to expanding the duties of the Guam Police Department Community Assisted Policing efforts, which is known as CAPE Volunteers, to include enforcement of the Hand-Billing Act and for other purposes. Madam Speaker, this bill seeks to do one thing. It expands the enforcement of the hand-billing law to include CAPE officers. You and I know that there is a critical shortage of uniformed officers, not only in Tumon, but all around the island. And as it relates to safety, we know that there's a shortage with every village of police officers and even police vehicles. But by allowing the CAPE officers to enforce this law provides for an added presence in our tourist district, and it also frees up the present uniformed officers to focus on more serious crimes and matters. Hand-billers, Madam Speaker, in recent surveys have been notoriously aggressive towards tourists and residents who walk along the sidewalks in Tumon. It's gotten to the point where if the tourist doesn't take their paraphernalia and their items, that they get really aggressive and irritated. So this is one way, Madam Speaker, to give a presence in the hotel area, some added presence of safety, some added presence of uniformed volunteers, but more importantly, to continue to respect the tourists that walk along our sidewalks and that are here to visit our island. So this has been requested by the Destination Management Committee of GVB, which is chaired by Vice President of the Mayor's Council, Mayor Hoffman, but also greatly supported by the Guam Hotel and Restaurant Association. So I ask that my colleagues please look at this legislation and give it its considerable efforts. So Sinamasi for giving me this opportunity to speak on 117-32, and I also want to thank you and Senator McCready for supporting this effort and being co-sponsors to this Sinamasi.
You're welcome, Senator. On the motion, Senator McCready, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I rise in full support of this bill, and I thank the author, Senator Muñoz Barnes, for including me as a co-sponsor on this bill. You know, I just returned from the States in Hawaii, and they've really let this problem get out of hand. I was walking on the sidewalk, and then, 20 years ago when I would walk on the sidewalks in Waikiki, you really didn't see many of these hand-billers trying to sell you, whether it's a hotel room or some sort of Hawaiian entertainment. But when I went there this past week, you couldn't really avoid them, and they're very aggressive. And so I thank the author for her forward thinking on this, to get a proactive approach and get a grip on it now before it gets out of hand. I have been through Tumon and walked through Tumon, and it is a problem. It's not a humongous problem right now, but I can see where it would kind of mirror Hawaii streets in Waikiki, and then that would become a problem. So I support this bill 100%. I ask my colleagues to support this bill. I think it's important not just to sustain and maintain the over 1 million tourists that we have coming to our island, but it's also important to try and expand on that tourism. And you wouldn't want anyone to leave Guam and have a bad taste in their mouth because a few rotten apples spoil the bunch with the hand billing. So I rise in full support, and I ask my colleagues to do the same. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Senator. On the motion, are there any other speakers on Bill 117? Senator Uggan, you're recognized.
Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, I certainly stand in full support of this legislation. I think that when you're looking at the enforcement of some of the hand billing activities out there, this is an issue that, although we recognize that many of these hand billers are out there trying to solicit their finances to take care of either the medical requirements or some of the other requirements, their basic necessities in life, I think that something has to give in terms of making sure that they comply and they follow certain regulations. And that's really where this body steps in. The only issue that I would like to share with members of this body and yourself, Madam Speaker, is that we have found a wonderful group of volunteers who are all active members of the CAPE program, the Community Assisted Policing Effort Program. Initially, this program was established to help police the handicap parking or the accessibility parking provisions and ensure that people are in direct compliance with that. They did a fantastic job in terms of trying to get out there and actually enforce and provide citations for individuals out there who do not comply with the law. And then my understanding is that their responsibilities expanded even more. And then now what we are doing is we're expanding the responsibilities to include the policing of hand billing activities. I stand here in support of it, but in direct recognition that these volunteers are doing a fantastic job for our community. And I think that at the end of the day, whether we call them a reserve component or whether we call them CAPE volunteers, eventually I anticipate that a few of them, if not a majority of them, may start insisting that either they get appropriate compensation or that their responsibilities do not expand too much, where they lose sight of what the original intent of the establishment of the CAPE program was for. So I wanted to share that perspective in terms of looking at this program that has been extremely successful, and it's been successful because of the volunteers and all of their efforts. As a matter of fact, about 2 weeks ago, I had received some information that a couple of the CAPE volunteers had presented citations to individuals who were parking over at Kmart, and they were not in direct compliance. So they are doing a very good job out there in the community, and by virtue of giving them this added responsibility, obviously, in this case, we anticipate they'll continue to do a fantastic job. But we want to, at least from my perspective, I would like to encourage us to take into consideration the statute and the mandate and the level of responsibility that is being provided to this volunteer group, because certainly there's going to come a point where perhaps either they increase the number of volunteers within their organization so that they can effectively carry out their statutes and their mandates, or we may stretch their efforts a bit thin in terms of giving them additional responsibilities and then them not being able to provide that additional support. So I recognize their efforts, and I'm not going to take away from what they've done very well for our island and for our community thus far, but certainly that's an issue that we as a body may have to deal with in the foreseeable future. So with that in mind, Madam Speaker, I stand in full support of Bill 117, and whether it be policing in Tumon Bay or policing island-wide, the reality is that the hand-billing activities to some extent has gotten a little bit out of hand, because when you see the same faces every single day without documentation, and they knock on your window and we make a contribution almost every single day, then obviously there comes that question whether in fact they're actually out there for the original intended purpose. I'm referring to the hand biller. So this is just going to reinforce perhaps policing that activity and hopefully that we can get it under control. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Welcome, Senator, on the motion. Senator Tom Ada, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of the bill and its intent to basically supplement the resources that's available out there to really bring this under control, the issue of hand billing. However, I really kind of question, and I know that this is not part of the amendment, but if we take a look at the existing law, so we have this individual, this volunteer who goes up there, he writes out a citation to Mr. John Doe, who's out there issuing out the handbill. And John Doe doesn't even carry with him any identification, but he says, my name is John Doe. So I guess the way it is right now, then that volunteer, that Cape volunteer, issues the citation to John Doe and says, show up at the court whenever. John Doe goes, okay, sure, 2 bags full too, and moves on. But so, you know, maybe that might scare him off, but I think maybe we really need to go a little further in as to who's getting these guys to go out there to issue the handbilling. And maybe the citation should be given to the business owner who's allowing these people to go out there and issue the hand billing to promote their business activity. And that's, you know, otherwise it's kind of like, okay, next guy, next John Doe. The other guy ran off. He got scared off by the Cape volunteers. So we hire the next guy, and we give him a handful of handbills, and he issues it out. And we keep going and going and going. But as long as there is no penalty placed on that business owner who is recruiting these guys to promote his business, it's an endless cycle. So I would like to make an amendment on page 2, starting at line 4 there, basically an amendment to the effect that would read, any business owner who allows persons to conduct hand billing to promote its business activity shall be in violation of any provision of this article and shall be subject to a fine of $200. So if the individual is out there then, issuing hand billings to try and entice the passersby to come into the Dallas Cowboys Lounge. Then you go into Dallas Cowboys Lounge and you ask for the owner and say, sir, here's your citation. And I think, I think that would certainly give that business owner reason to pause about hiring these John Does to go out there and harass the tourists that are walking the area. So that, Madam Speaker, is actually then the amendment that I would like to make, and I'll get with the clerk to give them the language of this amendment that I am proffering. Thank you.
Senator, can I ask you to read it one more time then for those who are listening? I'm
Yes, ma'am. It
seeing
would
there's
read
no
then,
objections.
starting on line 4, it would read, any business owner who allows persons to conduct hand billing to promote its business activity shall be in violation of any provision of this article, and we're now on line 5, and shall be subject to a fine of $200, et cetera, as is right there. $200 for the first offense and $500 for any subsequent offense.
Thank you very much, Senator. So on the motion, is everyone okay with it, or do you want to see a copy? You're okay? So no objections? 1 second. We'll take a brief recess. Legal counsel would like to confer with the author. The legislature is back in session. Senator Ada, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I would also like to add another amendment which Senator Lim Tiaco has pointed out on page 1. So then the amendments will be as follows, to be consistent. On page 1, line 6, it should read, "No person or business owner may engage in any hand billing activity between the hours of 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. within the marked restricted areas as described in section 3704. So that's the first amendment.
Okay, on the amendment, which is on page 1, line 6, after the word person, you add or business owner.
Correct.
Without any objections, so ordered.
The second amendment, Madam Speaker, will be on page 2, line 4, and it would read, "Any person conducting hand billing or business owner who allows persons to conduct hand billing to promote its business activity shall be in violation of any provision of this article and shall be subject to a fine of $200 for the first offense and $500 for any subsequent offense."
Okay, so that will be then really in place of this other one that you had given us earlier?
Correct. Yes.
Okay then, so everyone then please note that the earlier discussion of an amendment is no longer then being considered, and it's being replaced with a new language that the senators read on page 2, line 4, after the word billing, where it says a person conducting hand billing or business owner who allows persons to, and continue on basically to promote their business shall be in violation of this provision. And then on line 5, after article, and shall also be subject to a fine of. So are there any discussions on it? Does everyone feel comfortable with it? Any objections to the amendment on page 2? No objections, so ordered. Thank you, Senator. Senator Yamashita, you're recognized on the main motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I really appreciate this measure in that it always is very uncomfortable when you're walking along anywhere and you see these people trying to get your attention, kind of blocking your way sometimes, and it can be very intimidating. My question is this, and perhaps the author will yield. I'm wondering why we are allowing handling, did I say that right? Hand billing between 9:59 a.m. and 1:59 a.m. Is there a particular reason that says that kind of activity is okay to happen within that time period? And maybe there's something I'm missing that allows for that.
Okay. Senator Muñoz Barnes, I think you have a question. And I'm going to ask the senator again to please repeat the question.
No problem. No problem. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the question is this. On page 1, line 6, the prohibited activity describes the time of which this activity is not allowed. The hand billing is not allowed. My question is, why do we allow this activity between 9:59 a.m. and 1:59 a.m.? And perhaps there's a reason that I'm not aware of, but my question is, why is that allowed during that time period?
Madam Speaker, I really don't have I don't have an answer for that. I do know it was at the request from the committee working closely with the Hotel and Restaurant Association, who meet every month as it relates to safety and all the hotels that come together. So this was at their request.
Okay, so Madam Speaker, so then if the GHRA has determined that between 9:59 a.m. and 1:59 a.m. allows a certain time of economic development and support, I suppose they would know best because it's they drive it? Okay. I just think that, maybe we should delete it altogether?
No,
No?
it's within the existing law.
Well,
I'm sorry, I
even
know.
whatever's in the existing law, of course, can be amended. So the question is, Senator, I mean, so you have the prerogative, of course, based on what is currently in law. If you feel there is a need to amend the law, then of course. But we're going to take a brief recess to look at that, if that is, what you would like to do.
Thank you.
The legislature's back in session. I understand, Senator, then that you're good with, okay. So on the motion, are there anyone else who would like to speak? Senator Morrison, you recognize.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I clearly see there that these CAPE volunteers would seek the certification from the Chief of Police on regards to specific training on how to handle such activities. But my concern when issuing such a citation to a person in a parked vehicle versus an individual or a person may be rather much dangerous. So if the author could yield to what type of, if there's any insurance to protect these CAPE volunteers or volunteers from such injuries that may impact from such activities.
Senator, do you yield to the question?
I do know that, Madam Speaker, these CAPE volunteers work closely, and it's under the division of Guam Police Department. I do know that when we had the public hearing, Officer Flickinger, Elizabeth Flickinger, is the administrator for that, or the supervisor for that division. There are prerequisites. I don't know all the details in front of me that are delineated in the CAPE law that we have. So I do know that there are that the CAPE volunteers are under the supervision of the Guam Police Department. Again, they are volunteers, and they do have prerequisites for the training that is needed to perform these citations. They've done it. They've been doing it. This is just adding to their perspective in the designated areas. So I hope that helps.
Senator, we can take a brief recess. I know their legislation was passed, I think, in 26 or 26 Guam Legislature, allowing for volunteerism within the government, and we need to go back to that and review that and take a brief recess. still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The authors clarified that information, and I appreciate the guidance on this. I was just concerned, again, that we're dealing with a person versus a parked vehicle, and I want to make sure that these volunteers are protected if such an incident should happen. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Senator. On the main motion, is there anyone else who would like to have an opportunity to speak? There being none, Senator Muñoz-Barnes to close.
Jesus Mas, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to take this time to thank all those who shared their sentiments on this bill, and I appreciate the amendments that were put into this bill to make the bill even better and stronger. I do have an amendment, if I may, and it's going to be on line 16. Where it
What
says
page?
Page 2. Pursuant to Section 3705 of this article, the Chief Police is hereby authorized with Guam Visitors Bureau, if we can add in that, to use funds available in the handbilling enforcement. If I can take a 30-second recess, this was
Okay.
technical language that was
We'll
given
take
by
a brief
council.
recess.
We-
Legislature is back in session. Senator Munoz Barnes, you still have the floor.
Jesus Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I just want to take this time to thank you. After carefully looking over the provisions that are in 16 GCA Chapter 3 of the general provisions, I'm going to go ahead and withdraw my motion now and then close.
On the motion to withdraw an objection, so ordered.
Again, thank you, Madam Speaker, and to all my colleagues who helped to make this bill, strengthen this bill. I want to extend an undanklo na Jesus Masi and ask that this bill be moved to the third reading voting file. Sana Masi, Jesus Masi.
You're welcome. On the motion then to send Bill 117 to third reading file without any objections, so ordered. Bill number 119-32, Senator Tony Ada, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to make a motion to move Bill 119-32 COR as substituted by the Committee on Guam U.S. Military Relocation, Homeland Security, Veterans Affairs, and Judiciary to the third reading file. Speak on it.
Yes, you may proceed, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Bill 119-32 CR is an act to add a new Article 2 to Chapter 37 of 9 GCA relative to home invasions. Madam Speaker, it was the intent of my original bill to follow the Connecticut model legislation to elevate the crime of burglary to a new crime called home invasion if the crime was committed while the home was occupied. And during my research, I found that there was only a single degree of burglary in Guam law, and it didn't matter if the home was occupied or not. The bill as introduced was to make home invasion an enhanced burglary crime where the burglary is committed in a home that is occupied at the time of the break-in or by lying in wait for somebody to return home. During the public hearing, though, the AG had other thoughts and wanted to limit the offense of home invasion to those burglaries in which the burglary commits or intends to commit a violent crime and not just a felony. So if there was no intent to commit a violent crime, then there was just no home invasion. Madam Speaker, you know there are just few more things horrifying than someone breaking into your home while you are there or finding someone there when you arrive to your home. So to appease the AG, the bill was amended to change felony to violent crime. And we also allowed home invasion to be charged if any of the occupants was injured or killed during the crime, regardless of their intent. And additionally, we made the attempted home invasion and fleeing from the crime same as the home invasion itself. Therefore, if they had a getaway driver, someone on the lookout, they'll be just as guilty as the home invaders themselves. We established the crime of home invasion as a first-degree felony, which carries a sentence up to 15 years, with the minimum sentence of 10 years in prison. We've had too many home invasions, and just one is too many. Madam Speaker, I say no more, and I ask my colleagues to please support this bill. Thank you.
You're welcome, Senator. On the motion, Senator Morrison. Oh, I thought you raised your hand. Okay, Senator McCready.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in full support of this bill, and I commend our minority leader and assistant minority leader for saying with their actions and the language in this bill that enough is enough. You read the paper, watch the news. There's a crime like this almost every week, sometimes daily. If you read the news online now, you see that somebody broke into a house in the north and and assaulted a female while she was sleeping. And this was, I don't know if they consider it home invasion, but he broke into the house. And that just happened this week. And I do believe that our constituents are calling for tougher crimes. You know, many times the pushback when you mandate minimum sentences is the fact that we take the discretion away from the judges. And I've heard this time and time again that we tie the hands of the judges, and those are the exact words when we mandate. But really, Madam Speaker, recently, the recent home invasion in Emmett Hill, the person with their hands tied was the victim, who's still fighting for her life. So when we talk about hands being tied and we talk about discretion, we have to remember with every crime there's a victim. And with every home invasion, there's a possible chance that this person gets tied up and beat to they're in a coma for no reason. So this is not an easy bill. It's a tough step forward, and I commend the authors for it. But I think this body is the frontline defense when it comes to protecting our people. The people of Guam have identified a problem. Violent crimes are a problem on Guam. Recidivisms are a problem on Guam. Home invasions are becoming a problem on Guam. And this is the body that can stop that problem. So I thank the author, I support him 100%, and I ask our colleagues to do the same in an effort to keep this island safe from predators. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Welcome, Senator. On the motion, Senator Duenas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise in full support also of Bill 11932. Madam Speaker, it was interesting because I had just gone to visit Senator Atta on another matter when I sat down with him, and he passed the bill over to me and said, "Take a look at this, and would you like to be a co-sponsor?" And so I started reading through it, and I actually started to chuckle a little bit because I said, "You mean to tell me that this is not already the law of the land?" And he mentioned that no, you know, there's somewhat vague parameters at this point. And of course, as the retiring speaker just mentioned, you know, we don't have to go too far anymore, turning on the news or the TV to watch the news and to see that this is and has been, I guess, for at least the last several years, a major issue. So when the public hearing came up, of course, I gladly co-sponsored. When the public hearing came up, I remember recalling two different occasions when I came home to find my house broken into, ransacked, things stolen. And I remember, you know, cleaning up and getting ready for bed that night, just thinking to myself and thinking about my family and saying to myself, you know, this was bad. And I even had a hard time sleeping that night just because that's just a feeling, you know, that your personal space, your sanctuary, if you will, your home should be one of the safest places that you could ever be. And to have that feeling of having been, you know, violated and invaded like that, I mean, almost to the point of that night and other nights that I had a tough time sleeping. And then I started thinking how horrible it must be, you know, for those who experience this when they're home. And so, Madam Speaker, this bill is timely, it's very sensible, and as the retiring speaker said, you know, it is tough when you go outside of really the other branch of government and start really implementing and putting together minimums. But I got to say that when the Attorney General came down, they were in full support with some modifications. And they were in full support of really having to strengthen the statutes. And so, Madam Speaker, it was just sensible the way I saw it. And I think this is not only just common sense, but it's proactive. Even in the light of the fact that there are highly publicized at this point and receiving media attention with regard to the growing crime problem that we have on our beautiful island paradise. So, Madam Speaker, I certainly hope that the rest of our colleagues can see it the same way and support this very important piece of legislation, and to ensure that the message is clear with the public that those that would prey on our people in the place that should be the safest place, really, that they know it will not be taken lightly, and that they will face the fullest extent of the law, and also that that message is loud and clear. So thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to rise in full support of Bill 119.
You're welcome, Senator. On the motion, Senator Uggan, you recognize.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I stand in full support of this legislation. You know, when we talk about home invasion, it brings to mind part of my upbringing. Even at the age of 5, and I can recall also at the age of 10, and possibly at the age of 12, in Guam, there were many instances where we would park our vehicle, actually not at 12. My parents would park the vehicle, we'd leave the windows rolled down, or we'd leave our doors wide open, ajar at our homes. And you know, Madam Speaker, I guess things have changed quite a bit, because at that time, there was very minimal either home invasion or burglary activities in that case, and it was a safe, very safe community. Unfortunately, we've come to a point where, in fact, we need to consider legislation such as this to remind people and potential perpetrators, burglars, that in fact, this is a situation where a person's home is exactly that, is that individual's home. And if, in fact, it is not your home, then you have no business going into that home unauthorized and accessing some of the equipment or whatever you may need from that particular home environment. Madam Speaker, when we had the public hearing on this legislation, the AG came out and provided some recommendations. So I want to extend my appreciation for the AG for providing their input, because in terms of the definition of home invasion, we had to be consistent with some of the books out there and make sure that the intent of the good sponsor is still accomplished while making the appropriate changes. And that is what we have before us. I look at this, Madam Speaker, and anytime that we get tougher on criminals, it's a good sign. But what I also appreciate about stiffening the laws or increasing the penalties is hoping that, in fact, those increased penalties associated with whatever criminal act serves as a general deterrent for members in the community. And that's where I hope this serves as that deterrent, Madam Speaker, because obviously when anyone burglarizes a home where people are residing and people are present, then there's only one intent behind that individual's, I guess, burglary activities. And that is to go in, despite anyone being present at home, and try to acquire things that do not belong to them, or impose harm to the residents or the individuals that are residing in that home. So you look at this, and I certainly hope, Madam Speaker, that this sends a message out there that the homes belong to the residing occupant, that the homes belong to people, and that absolutely no individual has a right without acknowledgement and without authorization to be able to enter the home. Otherwise, you will face the possible charge of a first-degree felony. And that's anywhere from, if I'm not mistaken, 15 years to life in terms of imprisonment. So, Madam Speaker, I stand in full support of this proposal, and I commend the sponsors for putting it forth. I only wish that we didn't need it. But because of our present climate, it does dictate it. And let me close with this. Just 4 weeks ago, a neighbor to my mother-in-law had individuals. She was in the home, the neighbor, and she had individuals literally break into her home while she was there and take several of her equipment as well as assets within that home. And fortunately, she was not seen by those thieves. But, Madam Speaker, it's situations like those that calls for this, and fortunately there was no injury imposed on her, but it tells you, it's a very telling story, that unfortunately we come to an environment where these things happen, and that whether it's increasing the penalties associated with certain criminal acts is required. That's what we're doing here. But we certainly also have to work on the other piece of the equation, and that is providing our law enforcement with the additional resources that they need to be able to continue to carry out their responsibilities. And most importantly, to encourage our families to continue to look out for each other. And one final comment, Madam Speaker, I guess kudos goes out to that Barrigada organization, association that was recently covered in the media, where they got together because of home invasion incidents, and they were concerned for the safety of their particular section of their neighborhood, and they got together and they created their own police watch neighborhood patrol within the residents in that area. And I extend kudos to them for reaching out and extending themselves to be able to support each other. And hopefully efforts like that will continue to ensure the safety of people while they are in their homes. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Senator Uggan. On the motion, is there anybody else who would like to speak? Senator Santrada, would you want to close?
Madam Speaker, I'd like to make an amendment to add Senator McCready and Senator Uggan as co-sponsors. Thank you.
Okay, on that motion, without any objections, so ordered. So on the motion then to send Bill 119 to third reading 5 without any objections, so ordered. Senator Uggan on Bill 120.
Buenas, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to move that Bill number 120-32LS, as substituted by the Committee on Rules, be placed in the third reading file, please, for consideration by the body.
And would you like to speak on it briefly? Or you want to send it down?
I just want to very briefly comment, Madam Speaker, and because the title really is self-explanatory. First and foremost, I want to thank all of the co-sponsors of this measure, but the title says everything, and I'll just leave it at that. And it reads, an act relative to honoring Guam's men and women who have courageously and selflessly served our island people and our nation in the war on terror, and who have made the ultimate sacrifice through the establishment of a fallen heroes monument. And Madam Speaker, the task for incurring the cost, the 20 feet by 20 feet parcel of property at the Skinner's Plaza would be provided by the government of Guam, but the cost to be assumed and the responsibility of maintaining the monument would be with the fallen heroes of the Pacific Foundation Guam. So I also want to recognize this organization, as well as all of their members stepping forward and allowing for the partnership here in terms of constructing this monument to appropriately recognize our heroes. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Welcome, Senators. On the motion then to send Bill 120 to the third reading. Oh, Senator Tom Abbott. You-
Senator Tom Matta, you're recognized. Good
Uh,
morning.
thank you, Madam Speaker. I just maybe just a bit of clarification. Um, the bill basically would provide parameters on this memorial that is to be built, and that we're saying that it will occupy a land space not to exceed 20 by 20 within the Skinner Plaza. But I think we probably should go ahead and be more specific also as to which end of Skinner Plaza. Now, we can assume that it will be on the northern end of Skinner Plaza where the memorials are right now, but you know what assumptions are. So I would like to say then to add there on line 7 on page 2 to read 20 feet in width within the northern segment of the Skinner Plaza.
Okay.
That's it, Madam Speaker.
Ladies and gentlemen, it will say on line 7, length and 20 feet in width within the northern segment of Skinner Plaza. On the motion, are there any objections? Anyone wanting to speak? No. You want to speak on the amendment? If there are no objections, motion carries. Senator Ada, you still have the floor? Are you okay? Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on the main motion? If not, Senator Uggan, you can close.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank our colleagues for, their support, and certainly hope that we can get their support in terms of the eventual passage of this. But, Madam Speaker, I just have one additional amendment, and it's that infamous phrase to be inserted on line 6 on page 1. Before the fallen heroes of the Pacific Foundation is hereby authorized to erect, if we can insert the infamous phrase, notwithstanding any other provision of law. And the purpose behind that is because obviously there is also another facility that is presently being constructed on that parcel of property, and we want to ensure that this does not in any way, shape, or form, the language as presented impedes the construction of the monument as well as affect the construction of the Guam Museum. So I have communicated, just for your information, with the director of the Department of Chamorro Affairs, and he's very amenable to working this out so that in fact the monument can be properly constructed in that particular area. So if I can just recommend an insertion, Madam Speaker, on line 6, page 1, the phrase, notwithstanding any other provision of law, comma, and that's it. And then that should be my close. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
On that motion, are there any objections? Anyone wishing to speak? If none, motion carries. Next on the agenda is Bill number 123. I'll recognize Speaker Judy Wampat.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to make a motion to place Bill 123-32 LS to the third reading file, and I'd like to just briefly discuss it.
Consigi, por favor.
Thank you again, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Bill 123 really is a bill that was originally in Bill number 97-32, introduced by Senator Rodriguez and yourself. And in that bill, the Guam Territorial Highway Fund was supposed to be used for certain capital improvement projects, to purchase heavy equipment, and to address flood mitigation. And the last of that was to fund the Department of Revenue Taxation's transaction processing system. And because it was a multiple appropriations, and because some of our members feel that this particular appropriation really is not germane to the Guam Territorial Highway Fund. And so what we did is that we took the money, of course, and we rather not took the money. We took the item itself and wrote it in a totally separate bill, divided the whole thing into several bills, hence, of course, Bill 123. And it was waived because it did have a public hearing, but the chairperson also did put a committee report indicating all that. So this bill proposes then that to fund the Department of Revenue and Taxation's agency's transaction processing system. These are the monies in which these funds are coming from was originally in Bill 95. There was a very big discussion about the escheated funds. And what had happened instead is that the governor took the funds, with the exception of $500,000, took all the funds to pay the increments, leaving $500,000 originally again for the TGen purchases of some of the tracks that they're needed to move forward in the TGen highway project. I'm saying all this just to refresh everybody's memories of this and why we're here again. So as it turns out then that the monies again from going back to the Guam Territorial Highway Fund, the monies there was used for the TGen highway. And so everything has gone back to its original and germaneness of what the funds are to be used for. So there remains then the $500,000. So there is a companion bill to this that the governor has set aside, and so $400,000 of that is being then here appropriated for the agency's transaction processing system. And based on the testimony by Reverend Tax, the director, is that DRT currently faces the challenge of updating and correctly posting to the taxpayers' accounts payments, credits, and assessments since the discontinuance of a former point-of-sale system in November of 2011. The integrity of the data at DRT since that discontinuation has been deemed unreliable, resulting in numerous inaccurate billings and assessment to taxpayers. The third is that the present point-of-sale system currently used by the Department of Administration does not allow for interfacing of payments made at the Treasury of Guam. It only allows for the posting of general ledger accounts at DOA, but not taxpayer subsidiary ledgers at DRT. And lastly, DRT would like to implement a transaction processing system that would correct the interface issues, prevent duplication of work, and the posting of the general and subsidiary ledger accounts while protecting taxpayer information. So hence, of course, the reason for the bill and the appropriation of $400,000 to be able to do that. So I want to encourage, of course, my colleagues in terms of supporting this. It was publicly announced, like I said, that the $500,000 has been set aside by the governor. The balance of that has been used for the payment of the increment. Thank you again very much, Madam Speaker.
You're very welcome, Speaker Wampat. Anyone else wishing to speak on the main motion? Senator San Nicolas, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wanted to rise in support of Bill 123 and commend the author and all the co-sponsors for working very hard to put this together to be able to find a monetary solution to the software problems that the Department of Revenue and Tax has in terms of reconciling their accounts. I did want to get it, though, Madam Speaker, and talk about the need for us to, and the need particularly for Revenue Tax to understand that while the legislature is going out of its way to find money to turn on this system, to get them the software that they need to reconcile, it in no way takes away their responsibility to be able to reconcile these accounts whether there's a software in place or not. That's one of the things that has been really bothering me in my oversight hearings of Revenue Tax that I've been holding over the last several months and been bringing up regularly is even if there's no system in place on the technology side, that doesn't mean that all the work is supposed to be piling up and we're not supposed to be reconciling our government accounts. We have $196 million in receivables that are due to this government, 80 million of which are over the last year alone. And in our last oversight hearing of Revenue Tax, they made it clear that maybe 2/3 of that might be erroneously posted because it hasn't been reconciled out of the system. If we purchase this software and it breaks, are we going to have the same problem again? That's absolutely unacceptable from a financial management point of view on this government, Madam Speaker, and not just in this government, but in our households or in business. You wouldn't allow for an $80 million accounting error to be remaining on your books whether you had software or not. So Rev and Tax needs to get it together. They need to be reconciling their accounts whether there's software in place to do it or not. And the government needs to stop saying, oh, we don't have the money for that, oh, we don't have the software for that, and allowing problems, especially money problems, to continue to accumulate in this government and using those excuses for not getting the problem solved. We need to move beyond that. I'm very, very grateful to the author of the legislation and the co-sponsors for making the money available and getting that software in place. But we need to make it very, very clear that this government isn't going to be run on technology alone, and when that technology fails, we're going to sit back and wait for the solution to come by before we ever get the job done. The job needs to get done whether the technology is there or not, and the government needs to develop the fail-safe plans in order to make sure that we're able to function, even if we don't have all of the optimum pieces in place. So I thank the author of this legislation for putting it together. I look forward to voting in support of it, and I look forward to the Department of Revenue and Taxation stepping it up and developing the necessary contingency plans so that in the event that this software or any other future item within the agency were to fail, they would still be able to do their job. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Senator Nicholas. Anyone else wishing to speak on the main motion? Senator Yamashita and then Senator Limtiaco.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for allowing me to stand in full support of Bill number 123-32. Madam Speaker, we have been spending a great amount of time and extending a great amount of effort in doing what we can to help revenue and taxation continue to do a good job and to help them do an even better job in identifying monies that we need to collect and then actually collecting those monies. Madam Speaker and the rest of the co-authors of this measure are again creating an effort or extending an effort to give them the tools that would help them to do this more efficiently and more effectively. So this is a part of what can be done to help them do a more effective job in garnering those monies. So with that understanding and with the idea that with this software they will be properly trained, they will make sure there's maintenance aspects in place, they'll make sure that everything works right, works well, that all components will be able to communicate with each other, and most certainly that all agents will be trained in how to use it. This is a very good measure that can certainly help our government to continue to operate well. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
You're very welcome, Senator Yamashita. Senator Limtiaco, you're recognized, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I took the opportunity to discuss with the author of the bill directly regarding the availability of the escheated funds, and she had pointed out that in our last session we had a bill that was proffered originally had taken $500,000 from the escheated funds, and we had amended that so that it would come from the Territorial Highway Fund. So she has answered my questions, and I support the bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're very welcome, Senator Limtiaco. Anyone else wishing to speak? If not, Speaker Wampat, you may close.
Thank you again, Madam Speaker. I'd like to add on, of course, to the previous speakers, and primarily the chairman of Revenue and Taxation, because that has always been a concern. We've always stated that Revenue Tax is one of the most critical departments in the government, because they really go out there and collect the monies and all the revenues that we're going to need to operate this government. And the complaint has always been is that we're not very supportive by providing personnel, providing equipment, providing legal counsel, providing software and all that. And I've, of course, we were here at the time, remember, when Vice Speaker Dave Shimizu was here, and he was also a former director, and he understands the criticalness of that department. and has been very supportive in this legislature. The legislatures, past legislatures and present, have been really very supportive. And here we are now with this $400,000 to help them in the software that's needed. So what I like to do then, and I've conferred with the chairperson on page 2, where the reporting requirement is that rather than say that they would report no later than 180 days, is to delete that, and rather that they submit a monthly report, because we want, it's a monthly report on the obligation and expenditures of the funds and the status of its implementation. Because then we want to know, have they obligated this money ready to get the software? Have they then expended the monies for the software? And most importantly now is the implementation of the software to start getting it in operation. So that's the amendment that I would like to provide. And it's not monthly forever, it's just up to, and once it starts to be implemented, then I think that that's when it should end.
So, Madam Speaker, can you read that again?
On page 2, line 10,
Right, line 10.
where it says no later than 180 days, to delete that, but that we want to submit a report to the governor and to the legislature on a monthly basis for 6 months, or monthly basis rather, on the obligation and expenditure of the funds, and then lastly, and the status of its implementation. So that, and once that's completed, once it starts to be implemented, then the reporting can cease.
On that motion, does everybody understand that? Anyone wishing to speak on the motion? Are there any objections? If there are no objections, motion carries. Speaker Wampat, you can
Yes,
continue.
I'd just like to thank my colleagues for their support, and I move that Bill 123 be sent to third reading file. Thank you very much.
On that motion, no objections, motion carries. It's 123. Madam Speaker, you're recognized on Bill 127-32.
Thank you again, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to make a motion to place Bill 127-32 LS to the third reading file. I'd like to just briefly discuss it.
Please do.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this is the last dollar amount, again, in which I've given you a summary of what happened with Bill 95. This is the remaining $500,000 that the governor has set aside. Like I said earlier, $400,000 is with Bill 123 for the tax processing system. The remaining $100,000 is for the Cash Economy Enforcement Act of 2011. And just for a little more information for our new members to the legislature, because last year, Public Law 31-135, called the Cash Economy Enforcement Act of 2011, was passed. Speaker Pangilinan, Senator Tom Ada, and myself we had sponsored this legislation. This legislation provides the necessary tools for the Department of Revenue Tax with more enforcement abilities, and adds teeth to existing enforcement laws to assess fines and penalties for businesses who underreport or do not report taxes. These cash-based, which are both for profit and even for non-profit businesses, are those where goods, services, and other transactions are paid for substantially in cash, and where the business are either substantially underreporting or misreporting the proper amount of tax liability on any tax return. It is also for those who have failed to have a license to do business as required by law. It is also for having no fixed or permanent principal place of business, for failure to maintain adequate books and records, failure to record transaction by receipts. And I know many of us have gone to stores where they really don't give receipts, they don't ask for checks, they don't take credit cards, and everything is all done in cash. Also, there's a failure to record the transaction in a cash register, and many times it's just a box under the counter. And failure to record and then not accepting their checks or electronic payment devices for business transactions. The Cash Economy Enforcement Act of 2011 also establishes additional powers, functions, and duties for DRT to investigate reported or suspected violations of tax laws, with a special emphasis on cash-based businesses, and issue fines or cease and desist citations to any person if there is a cause to believe the person has violated any provision of the Act. Additionally, the Act will provide a funding for an educational awareness campaign to educate taxpayers on their responsibilities and provide funding for critical enforcement officers and investigators. Senator San Nicolas has emphasized that the Department of Revenue and Taxation has not collected over $196 million in receivables and $80 million from last year alone in taxes. So essential revenues that can be used to fund our hospital, public safety, and schools are being lost, and that's the reason for this. So per the mandate then of Public Law 31-135, we have received a breakdown from DRT outlining the shortage of resources and manpower and funding requirement to effectively pursue its collection efforts and the mandate. And this in itself, this bill will provide the seed money to get them started, to be able to start implementing the law. And although, of course, like I said, the amount that they've given us is a lot more, but this is something just to get them started, start the education program to let all the businesses know that, now they're going to be ready to implement and go after those who are violating any portion of the law. So I'd like to ask my colleagues again if they can please support Bill 127. Thank you again, Madam Speaker.
Point to Speaker Wampat. Anyone wishing to speak on the main motion? Senator San Nicolas, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Again, I very much appreciate the hard work of the author and the co-sponsors in trying to find resources to support the Department of Revenue and Taxation in their mission. On this particular bill, though, Madam Speaker, I do rise in reservation because I understand that the need is to put this money into the Department of Revenue and Taxation to support the enforcement of the Cash Economy Act of 2011. But that's where I have some concerns, Madam Speaker, because for me, I have this very strong philosophy that there's a fine line between money and management. And providing this extra $100,000 to the Department of Revenue and Taxation, an agency under my oversight, mind you, so I'm basically standing here saying, I don't want my agency to get this $100,000. And I'm doing that for a reason. First of all, the provisions of the Cash Economy Enforcement Act of 2011 are pretty clear, and I want to go over some of them. One of them, Madam Speaker, is to investigate reported or suspected violations of business license laws for civil enforcement purposes. Another is to enforce the business license laws by issuing, enforcing, or executing citations, fines, infractions, and assessments. And on the surface, that sounds like a pretty basic thing to do. What bothers me, Madam Speaker, is that in the current functions of the agency, not even giving them this extra $100,000, but in the current functions of the agency, they aren't even able to do that. And that's a problem for me. And I feel very uncomfortable giving them extra $100,000 to do more when they're not even doing the basics of what they're supposed to be with the existing resources that they have. And I'll give you an example, Madam Speaker. In the reports from the Department of Revenue and Taxation, their accounts receivables indicate that the withholding taxes of businesses are outstanding to the tune of $21 million. Of particular interest are those withholding taxes that are maybe between 0 to 3 years old. So over the last 12 months, we have 1.6 million. Over the last 24 months, we have 5 million. And over the last 36 months, we have an additional 3 million for a total of over $10 million, maybe $11 million. Now, these withholding taxes are taxes that are supposed to be paid by existing businesses in operation. If they're not paying their taxes, the law is very clear. They're not supposed to get their business licenses renewed. So how are these businesses that are having withholding taxes registered and unpaid allowed to get their business licenses? They're not supposed to get their business license. Or they're supposed to go in and work out a payment plan with the Department of Revenue and Taxation, or if the investigators find that the business actually has money in its accounts, they're supposed to make whole on these taxes. And withholding taxes, Madam Speaker, is a particularly sensitive issue for me because that's where tax refunds come from. If you don't pay your income tax withholding, how do we pay the tax refunds to the employees who deserve them? So when we have $20 million in withholding taxes that is unpaid, that's $20 million in tax refunds that we're not able to capitalize. We're not able to find the money for that. We got to go in and find it from some other resource in the government. When these businesses are supposed to be the ones paying their withholding taxes so the employees can get their refunds. And it's even worse, Madam Speaker, because when you don't pay your withholding taxes, you're basically giving yourself an interest-free loan at the expense of the government. That's the people's money that you're getting an interest-free loan from, and you're making the people be on the hook for paying the refunds to those employees because you don't want to remit the withholding taxes that you're supposed to for those employees. So when we have, in the last 12 months, 466 businesses that haven't done that, in the last 24 months, 550 more businesses that haven't done that, and in the last 36 months, another 324 businesses that haven't done that, we have over 1,000 businesses that haven't been paying their withholding taxes. How are they getting their business licenses? Do all these 1,000 businesses have payment plans set up at the Department of Revenue and Taxation? That's a basic function that the existing operation is supposed to be able to catch and enforce, and they're not doing it. So I very much appreciate the intention, Madam Speaker, of the author and the co-sponsors to give additional money to the agency to be able to enforce this cash economy aspect, this law that was passed. But if they're not doing the basic functions of what they already have and what they're already supposed to do, I'm uncomfortable giving them $100,000 more when they're not doing the bare minimum already that they're supposed to be able to do right now. So I'm not quite sure what I want to do at this point, Madam Speaker, whether I want to revert it back to committee or what. I really, really appreciate the bill. I think that it's very, very well intended, and I think that the money will be well spent when, not if, but when, Rev and Tax finally gets its act together and starts doing what the basic functions are in the agency, so that when we give them extra, they're able to go above and beyond and actually start implementing the additional provisions that this legislature passes into law. Because we can do, Madam Speaker, and this is one of the things that frustrates our community. Our community thinks that because we're senators, we're supposed to be able to go out there and make sure that things are happening. We have only so much power as a legislative body, Madam Speaker. We can pass laws. We can set up the system so that it's able to function that way. We can have oversight hearings that we can ask why isn't it functioning that way. But in the end, the enforcement and the function of this government is in the hands of the executive branch. So when we have problems in our collections, and I get phone calls from people saying, you got to go out there and you got to fire people. I can't fire anybody. I can't go out there and issue disciplinary actions. I can't, bring the hammer down and say, if you don't get your act together, you're going to be suspended. I can't do any of that. All I can do is raise questions as to why things aren't being done, and hope that we can somehow configure the laws in a way that are going to allow or facilitate things to get done. But when the basics aren't getting done, and we're introducing new legislation to give more money, when the agency hasn't demonstrated its ability to just meet the basics, That's where I want to say, hold off. The one and only power that we do have as a legislature is the power of the purse. And so I want rev and tax to start demonstrating that it's going to be doing the bare minimums before it's going to get another dollar of the people's money to do more when it's not even doing the basics. So that's where I stand on this bill. I guess I'll go ahead and just leave it at that, and allow for the author to go ahead and consider what it is that I brought up, and whether or not we probably would want to hold off on this additional appropriation until a later time when Revenue Tax is able to demonstrate that they're able to take this money and put it to a higher and better use. So I'll just leave it at that, Madam Speaker, but between now and then I rise in a serious reservation of giving more money to a situation that obviously has a management problem, not a money problem. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Senator San Nicolas. Anyone else wishing to speak on the main motion? If not, Speaker Wampat, you can close on 127.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And, and I truly understand the frustration of the previous speaker. That has always been, a problem that the legislature faces, is that we only have the power of the purse. And when it comes to implementation and enforcement, that is the executive branch's responsibility. And we can continue to support and send money, and if and then we ask for reports from them as well, then we expect that some things are actually being done. And when we had met with the Department of Revenue and Taxation, we were asking what would it take basically for the implementation, of not just, of course, this legislation, but even others for that matter. And I know that if we go through the budget this year, you would see, our members would see that how the legislature has helped to allow for the seasonal hiring of individuals to help, especially during tax months. And so we've done that. Now granted, things that the government has been really tight, and we're unable to provide additional funding to hire the additional personnel, those who have retired. The fact that right now, currently, what the department really needs, not necessarily even for the enforcement of the cash economy law, but that they definitely have needs, and the needs are, one is to be able to try to hire 3 tax investigator 1s. They need to hire 3 revenue agent 1s. They need revenue officers. They need compliance inspectors, and they need license officers. Now, one of the things that we always say is that when we give them the hardware and the software that they're going to need to do their jobs more efficiently and effectively, and of course faster, is that there would be less personnel than actually needed to manually input all of the information. So with the software, then they could, in essence, and I'm only reporting what the industry says, is that for every technology that they have, and the one individual inputting all the information actually replaces other workers, other individuals, anywhere between 2 to 3, depending on what the work level that needs to be done. In this particular case, I do know that there's some things that the machines can't do, and you need individuals to go in there. You need the investigators to go out there and do the investigation. You need also compliance officers. You need them to go to inspectors, rather, and compliance inspectors to go out there and make sure that they are in compliance. The machines can't do that. And then for the licensing, again, of these businesses, then by the same token, you're going to need these officers. and then, of course, the revenue agents. There's just some things I realized that in some departments and agencies that, there is the true need of technology and the software, but there's also others that some of the technology can't do. And with this, just looking at these needs of the department, we're looking at a total of 15 FTEs, and of course to the tune of about $700,000, and personnel cost alone is about $540,000, and then there's the training, the other equipment that's going to be needed, supplies and materials. So coming up with a grand total of $700,000. So I understand, of course, the concern, and I really support his concern. I like to be able to maybe see again, very similarly to what we did with 123, we can do in 127, is have that same reporting system to tell us where they're at, and I say monthly, and it may sound like, my gosh, that's just too much, to do on our part. But I think we need that level of confidence that, we're supporting. There's no way you can go out there and say we're not supporting you, because we are. And by doing this, you've got to show us now then that, you're making, good use of these really limited amount of money that is available, not just to everybody, but now to them. And we would really like to hold their feet to the fire. And the reason why I say this, because we're getting very close also to the budget. And, and if they want more support, additional support from this legislature for personnel, then they got to prove themselves. They got to show that this is what they're doing. This is how much we have accomplished, and that we can even, accomplish even more should we then, have the additional resources, whether it's personnel or others. And show that to us. When they come in, show that to the chairperson as well, so he can have that comfort level that they truly are doing what they're supposed to be doing, because I'm just as amazed too when I hear that, withholding these withholding taxes from, these businesses of 21 million. I mean 21 million. Just imagine, what can we do with 21 million? And I'm just hoping, of course, I hate to say it, but sometimes I realize that, we can think small amounts of thousands of dollars or hundred thousands of dollars, and really rarely into the millions, but they have this monumental task to be able to go out and collect on these receivables, and collect on taxes that have not been collected for not just 1 year, but for several years. And if there's anything, of course, in which any one of us can do to assist the chairperson to be able to move GRT forward, that I would do whatever I can to support his efforts. So I know the request was try to hold off, but I think maybe the best thing would be right now is to just require them, and that is an amendment, I'm sorry, to the clerks, the same amendment that I had submitted for Bill 123. I would like to submit that same amendment, that reporting requirement as well. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Does everybody understand that? Take the same provision and change it on page 2, on section 3, on that motion. Anyone wishing to speak on the motion? It would read on that, the reporting requirement, the Director of the Department of Revenue and Taxation shall submit a report to Imagalahinguahan, y Legislature on a monthly basis as to the obligation and expenditure of the funds following enactment of this act, detailing all transactions pertaining to the funds appropriated herein. On that motion? No objections? Motion carries. Motion to move it down to the third reading without any objections. Motion carries. Thank you very much, Speaker Wampat. We are now
Okay, we're going to proceed with Resolution 106-32. I recognize the author, Senator Munya Barnes. Here.
Madam Speaker, I move that Resolution 106-32 COR is introduced by myself and you as second co-sponsor be moved to the third reading, and if I can speak on it.
Yes, Senator, you may proceed.
Madam Speaker, Resolution 106-32 is relative to supporting the development of a public policy, investment, and operational framework for establishing a sustainable and green cruise industry in Micronesia, with Guam serving as the regional hub. For the first part of the Resolution 106 recalls and establishes the broad regional support that has been given to the development of a Micronesian cruise industry, Madam Speaker. Item number 2 establishes a current baseline of resources earned by the government of Guam to date on the cruise industry. Item 3 of Resolution 6 also creates extraordinary opportunities for entrepreneurial investment and job creation for Guam. Another item is that the United Nations acknowledges that the tourism is the most effective way of growing the economy of small island developing states. I want to note that the South Pacific has already gotten a jump start on northern Micronesia. Madam Speaker, they established a South Pacific Cruise Alliance, and they have booked over 425 port calls this year and expect to have over 275,000 passengers this year, compared to Guam's 39 port calls in the last 4 years. For those who don't know what the South Pacific Cruise Alliance is, it is a nonprofit organization gathering of the South Pacific region, which is the Cook Islands, Fiji, Samoa, American Samoa, Tahiti, the Kingdom of Tonga, which was mainly created to promote the South Pacific as a cruise destination and set up a new segment for cruise routes. Its objectives are also to develop and foster good relations and collaborate with other with all cruise industry destinations, not just within the Pacific region, but with all the operators, the line operators, the industry stakeholders, and just everyone that's in this cruise industry, Madam Speaker. The cruise shipping conference that I attended has played a key role in helping the South Pacific develop their market, and that same mission can play the same role for here on Guam. The cruise shipping Miami conference that happened last March, Madam Speaker, was, it's been 29 years since its inception. And I don't know, my colleagues are familiar, but we have all representation from around the world that seeks to come to this conference so that they can tap and network and collaborate and integrate and work with itinerary planners. I did have the opportunity to go there, and one of the concerns that came up was when I had asked about the possibility of coming to this part of Micronesia, us being the blue continent, it was, to my surprise, that they didn't know about our whereabouts and that we weren't even in the radar. And one of the keen recommendations that was sent to me was that it was important that we partake because of our destination of our tropic island paradise, because not just Guam, but our neighboring islands here in the Pacific and in Micronesia, inclusive of our brothers and sisters of CNMI, Palau, the Federated States of Micronesia, the Republic of the Marshall Islands, that we could literally tap into a market that could be proven successful. By helping grow the economy of the other islands in Micronesia, Madam Speaker, we can eventually help reduce the amount of economic migration that occurs as regional migrants look for economic opportunity. I want to note that Resolution 106 acknowledges that the Micronesia Cruise Association has played and will continue to play a key role in developing this industry and working to establish a professional operational framework. They have been very diligent, Madam Speaker, to making sure that they collaborate with even folks with the Association of Pacific Island Legislators. I know that they've made a presentation to that August body recently, and it was very much there was a favorable, if not full support of wanting to see where Micronesia can step into or jump into this this arena of new opportunity. This resolution, Madam Speaker, calls for the Guam Visitors Bureau, the Guam Economic Development Council, the Port Authority of Guam to designate a high-level focal point to participate in the Micronesian Cruise Industry Development Group, which will be coordinated by the chairman of the Micronesian Cruise Association. And for my colleagues who don't know, it's been created. It is a non-profit organization. It is now in its second leadership, with Mr. Jerry Paris being the president. Mr. Monty Mesa was the the past president. And I want to say that Micronesian Cruise Association continues to work through working with the collaboration of GVB to get this moving. The Micronesian Cruise Association will be responsible for coordinating the development of a 5-year strategic action plan, which will have its goals for the full establishment of a sustainable Micronesian cruise industry. And that goal, Madam Speaker, is to shoot for by 2020. I know that sounds far away, but uh, we're already just like 5, 6 years away. 6 years away. The chairman of the Micronesian Cruise Association will transmit a copy of the final strategic action plan to the chair and vice chair of the Committee on Tourism, and we're asking for that strategic plan to be no later than January of 2014. I also want to say, Madam Speaker, that that this resolution, the United Nations acknowledges that the tourism is the most effective way of growing our economy for small island developments. The United Nations World Tourism Organization recently reaffirmed that the Global Summit on Sustainable Development in Rio, that international should be considered a principal economic activity for small island developing states if planned and managed according to the principles of sustainability. Often small islands developing in the states of Guam and Micronesia struggles to compete with the global economic market. And I think that if we continue to work down this route, we can be able to do so. Madam Speaker, when we started this this attempt, I want to note for the record that it was in March of 2000 when APIL passed a board resolution requesting that the members of the government support and promote marketing in Micronesia as a new destination for cruise industry. And in March 7 of 2003, the Western Micronesian chief executives, in their first joint communique, endorsed the idea of this regional cruise as a crucial element in regional economic development strategy that focused on developing this regional tourism. And I want to say, Madam Speaker, that it is now 2013. And at the 17th Micronesian Chief Executives that was held last year here in Guam, the Chief Executives once again reaffirmed their collective support for this development of this cruise industry for the region by endorsing and presenting presentation made by the GBB and the progress on MCA. And I want to say that 13 years later, Madam Speaker, we're now just fast forwarding and trying to jump on this bandwagon. And I want to say that while everybody else in the world has not is not trying to jump, they've already jumped in, we're still running and trying to jump and catch the bus. And in our efforts to looking at new resources and working for extraordinary opportunities to create jobs, Madam Speaker, I think that this is definitely a good thing to do. I do want to say that if we continue to work this plan, to move forward on this plan, and asking MCA to have a strategic plan completed within the next 5 to 6 months, I'm telling you that the opportunities for Guam and Micronesia will be great. Madam Speaker, I know that you are the president of the Association of Pacific Island Legislators, and I know that when the Micronesian Cruise Association was invited to speak with representation of an itinerary planner that came from Florida, I know that the policymakers were very enthusiastic. They were very excited. There was a lot of questions that were proffered, And in the ultimate end, they said they wanted this. But they also asked that Guam take the leadership as usual, because we seem to be as westernized as we are. They consider Guam as the big brother or big sister, or some would even say the godparent, the godmother of Micronesia. And they wanted us to take the leadership and verge forward for this adventure or this indenture. And I just want to say that I hope that my colleagues see this as a very viable framework to get started. It was talked about in the last decade, +3. We're going on 14 years, and if we don't start now, we're going to have missed that bucks on millions and millions of tourists wanting to work, to visit here. I want to say that when this opportunity came up in the year 2000, they were looking at potentially tapping into a 6 to 7 million visit industry of travelers taking the cruise line opportunity. And now, as we look at information that's provided today, if we don't tap into this operational framework, we would have missed the opportunity to tapping into 20 billion tourists traveling using the cruise line industry. So I hope that gives some semblance of what has been happening and what we truly need to do to move this industry forward, and the creations of jobs and the possibilities for economic resources to come to our island would be a win-win for our community, Madam Speaker. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak on this Resolution 106. I want to thank the presenters, most especially the Micronesian Cruise Association with Jerry Paris leading that right now, for their hard work and working closely with Guam Visitors Bureau to get this program going. So, Saina Maasid and Situs Maasid and Situs Binidisi.
You're very welcome, Senator Munya Barnes. On the motion, Senator Yamashita, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, in allowing me to speak in support of resolution number 106-32. I agree with the mover and yourself about how this really is an opportunity to expand our hospitality and tourism industry. Just as importantly for me, it's an opportunity to really put some support behind the whole notion of the Blue Continent that you have spoken about several times. I think that if we do connect and collaborate and partner with our brothers and sisters across the islands, we will be stronger and more viable, and it'll be a healthier and happier place in this part of the world. The mover of this resolution talks about 2020, about how a master plan will be created, or perhaps that's when we're actually going to activate. And I really do agree that we do need to spend time in developing such a master plan and defining the steps to have a green cruise industry in this region. Most certainly, we need to identify what needs to happen at the port. In all the conversation recently, we want to make sure that they are ready, that they are fortified, that we do support them, and that they have the kinds of resources needed to welcome the thousands and thousands of visitors that may be coming on a more regular basis. Most certainly, we want to ensure that the transportation aspect across our island is ready for these thousands and thousands of people. What an opportunity to ensure that our mass transit system is fortified and activated and in place, not only for our visitors, but for sure our families across our island. For sure, this is an opportunity to strengthen the tourism that we find in Tumon, to activate the bed and breakfast tangent that we've talked about in this session. Of course, this industry will be bringing their own beds with them. But if they want to visit and spend some time off of their cruise liners, then that would be an opportunity to do that. Mr. Speaker, this is also an opportunity, I think, if we work it, to say, can we have our students and our families partner, or is there some kind of exchange program so that our kids can go on these cruise liners and go to other parts of our region and then come back? I think that would be a great opportunity for particularly those of us who have never been on a cruise liner and might be interested in doing that. And as well, what kinds of training opportunities in our workforce development can be provided through a green cruise industry in Micronesia. So there are many opportunities, I think, that can be brought to fruition, as well as there are many aspects that need to really be further defined as, for example, again, our port and the ability to welcome such cruise liners, our transportation, and what we can do to make sure that these visitors can go to all parts of our island, not just Tuman, but all parts of our island, and that our transportation system does need to be identified. So, Mr. Speaker, I stand in support, and I think it's exciting, and I think that with the proper kind of work and conversations in ensuring that the right people are at the table, to include our translators and to include everybody representing our different cultural groups, and we can welcome everybody with Duck Duck Goose at the port. And so, you know, those kinds of opportunities we integrate, and I think that's really very exciting. Duck Duck Goose. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, our great Senator Yamashita. Speaker Wampat, you're recognized, and we also have the pleasure of hearing your perspective as President of the Association of Pacific Island Legislatures. Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And yes, you're right. It was just last year in which the election was held, but I've been a member for you know, a couple of years. And one of the things that, and you recall, when we were in Kashrai during one of our board meetings, is that I had introduced a resolution basically to capture that name that the previous speaker had alluded to, and it's to explore the blue continent. So APIL has, as part of its license, is the blue continent, and we make many references to it, and we encourage all the islands in Micronesia to continue to use that term, the blue continent. And you know, so it's so ironic, because when we think of all the different continents, and the MCEs, the Micronesian chief executives, basically would say that the oceans, although islands are so far apart, the oceans really connect us. Hence, of course, that thought is that, well, you know what, we're all in the Pacific, in the big blue Pacific, so therefore we now consider ourselves the blue continent, and it is the largest continent in the world. I do rise in support of Resolution 106. Senator Munya Barnes, I thank her very much, you know, for, of course, introducing this under her purview with tourism, and working very closely also with Mr. Jerry Paris. When we had passed a resolution in Kashrai, and not just the development and the licensing of the blue continent, one of the things, the resolution that you and I also had introduced, was to have in our General Assembly at CNMI to invite Mr. Paris and another individual from Florida who deals a lot with cruises. And they made a presentation at CNMI, was well received, and that was the very first thing to let us basically know how the industry is, what would it take, what do we need to do as islands. And so everyone took the information back with them. In the resolution, we also had submitted a copy of, to the chiefs, because we wanted to make sure that here the legislators are talking about this, but we didn't want it to be in isolation of the rest of the government. And we know that in order to make this actually happen, it would take the chiefs, the governors and the presidents of each one of the islands. So what we did then was to give them a copy, and as a result of that, they too jumped on the bandwagon to support this. one of the things that we wanted to make sure as well is that that we were told is that we can't be promoting our island by saying, you know, we got the beautiful, you know, sun and all the beautiful beaches and the sand and everything and the waters, because then we're all selling the same thing. And what we need to do is to find things that are really very unique about every place so that they'll be able to experience Micronesia. And the one great thing that I love about this whole idea, I would share an experience I had many years ago when I did a cruise of the Greek islands. And one of the things that we did is that at night, of course, the ship would be sailing from one island to the next island. And then, you know, we'll be sitting out there early morning. We would all then go and take a tour of each of the islands that we went to, stopped to visit, got on board again, started to take off and had dinner and everything, slept again. Next morning, we found ourselves in a different island. And because it's the Greek islands, when you really stop and think about it, it's very similar to what we could actually do here. The great thing about that whole idea, because a lot of islands would say, well, we don't have the infrastructure, it'd be very difficult to do. But the only thing right now with cruise liners is that there will not be a need to go and build hotel rooms for the tourist visitors, because they would sleep and basically have their breakfast and dinner on the ship. But what the islands would have to do now is prepare for the tourists to have places to go to and possibly lunch, you know, things to buy, to take with them as they move on. So the infrastructure cost would not be as great, you know, for them. And a lot of places too, if you look at it, I take Pohnpei. Pohnpei, of course, you know, one of the, well, there are more now wonders of the world, is in Pohnpei they have this area called Nan Madol. And it's one of the, at least originally, one of the 8 wonders of the world, where people can go to look at the Nan Madol. And it's accessible, of course, by small boats and possibly maybe even a bus or a car to get there. Then you have in Kashrai, of course, the beautiful, you know, rainforest. Then you go to Palau. Then you have, you know, the Rock Islands. Then you go to RMI. And of course, you have as well the different islands as well. Then there's fishing, and then Chuk, there's the diving sites. There's so many wonderful things that every one of the islands can offer to tourists. And now tourists are looking at the idea that, my gosh, here is this area, the Blue Continent, that hasn't even been discovered, you know. And the thing that a lot of people like, of course, is natural resources, natural and cultural resources that the islands all offer. The great thing too, there's so many great things, is that the ports that will be able to handle small to medium-sized cruise liners. So that again makes it available for the islands to be able to receive this. The leaders love the idea because we all know, because of the compact impact, many of their citizens and residents have left the island. They're going through this brain drain, and they're hoping that through developing then this type of industry will bring some of their people back again as well. Those who have been educated, those who have been experienced, can come back and help again to build their islands. And you know, because we've experienced that ourselves, and we're starting to see that, you know, our young people are starting to come back to the island. There are many benefits, and one of the things, and several of the things that I like to share with you on the financial impact to this that was presented by Mr. Paris, is that because this is such a growing industry in the world, that Guam and Micronesia can participate in this. And I'd just like to give you a little bit on the estimated economic impact to Guam. That that we know that there's already 39 port calls to Guam since June 2012, and the total passengers for that, excluding the cruise, about 27,000 tourists. And and if there is, they spend about even $154 per person, will come up to about $2 million, and take the multiplier effect of 1.75, you get 5 billion. 4% GRT is 204,000. 40% payroll, 2 million. At 28% payroll tax, $573,000. So, in essence, what Guam will get in this, with just the 39 usually, with the 39, it's about $5.1 million into our economy, and 778,000 in GRT and payroll taxes will be paid into the GovGuam tax base. Now, GVB's accounting of this, of course, when they're thinking of GVB expenditures on the cruise market, well, that's totally different. Maybe we don't even need to discuss that dollar amount because they're the ones that are making that estimate. But the area, the ports would all need to be spruced up, because I remember the Vice Speaker when we were first talking about the port and what needs to happen at the port to prepare to receive these tourists, is that we can't have them come to the area where all the tuna fish will come in to be cut and sorted, and packaged. It definitely has to be much in a more a cleaner and area, rather than just where all the fish is at. The other is the thing that, and I'm trying to find the date, and I know that this senator, the author had originally stated that the first resolution that was passed was in 2000, March 2000. I think there is one that was later, like I was saying, in Cochrane. I'm trying to get the date for that, so if I may, for a technical amendment, is to add that date as well in the resolution number. I don't have that. We're calling right now our secretariat, APIL secretariat, to get that date and the resolution number. So that's my first motion, if I may, an amendment that I'd like to make.
Okay, on Speaker Wampet's amendment, then we'll just go and allow the legal counsel and the clerk to provide that information in the resolution. Okay, on her amendment, objections so ordered.
And just for information for our colleagues, the APIL is the Association of Pacific Island Legislatures. That means there are 2 members from every entity who have legislative members. And the members are Guam, Sinamai, Yap, Chuuk, Kashrai, Pohnpei, the Republic of the Marshall Islands, Palau, Kiribati, American Samoa, Nauru, and Hawaii. So those are all the members of APIL. The other amendment I would like to ask is on page 4, that, whereas Micronesian cruise, or maybe not in the whereas, but on a resolve clause, similar to what we have here on page 4, line 14, where the Micronesian Cruise Association, in partnership with the Guam Visitors Bureau, I would like to make a resolve clause that the Micronesian Cruise Association try to partner, one of the resolutions, to partner with the individual entities, Visitors Bureau, so that we can kind of kickstart this by, once we get them involved, then I think maybe they would, although I know they want us to take the lead, but the reason why it's important that their Visitors Bureau as well start to get involved, because they need to know what are some of the requirements and preparation that needs to be done in their individual islands. So that's a resolve clause. I think that would help. Yes. So, one of the resolve clause.
So on Speaker Wampet's amendment to include a new resolve clause that the Micronesian Cruise Association partners with their respective Visitors Bureau in the development of this idea. Okay, on that amendment, there are no objections, so ordered. So clerk, you got that? Okay.
Yes. In addition, on page 6, now where we want to give copies of these, I would really like that copies also be sent to all of the Micronesian chiefs, show this support, and to also to APIL, the member entities of APIL as well, and the Visitors Bureau of each member entity.
Okay.
And yes, you know, and that's a great idea. Oh, well, I don't know now because that's going off island to, how would that be? I'm asking for your guidance, Mr. Speaker, that, you know, when we want to send this now to others outside, of course, of ourselves, of the governor and Mr. Paris.
Maybe, Madam Speaker, we can bring copies of this resolution. I know Senator Barnes will be among the delegation to the upcoming APIL meeting, and then she can probably present 10 copies to each delegation, and then
So-
ask them to help us
So
disseminate it.
maybe then to make it easier.
But you can
where-
include their names in the transmittal.
Oh, okay. So that will be good then. So that's what I would like to do, is to make sure.
Just generally, you could say all Micronesian chief executives.
Yeah, MCES.
Traditional chiefs, if you want to
Yes,
recognize them,
traditional
which we
chiefs,
always do.
yes.
Um,
And APIL.
and the visitors, and the respective visitors bureau,
Mhm. And we.
and the delegate APIL delegates.
Yes. And one other one, because
Let
many
me
times.
address your amendment. And,
Okay.
is Senator Barnes okay to help disseminate that at the upcoming General Assembly? I think it's perfect opportunity. Okay, on Speaker Wampat's amendment, and we'll give her the liberty to work with the sponsors, so we might have to expand this distribution list. On that amendment, any objections? No objections to order?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Speaker.
And the last, of course, is just to let you know again as well, because then if you have any question in your minds about this, is that the resolution, APIL resolution number 52 BOD-07, is requesting the recipients of this resolution respect the use of the term Blue Continent as being the intellectual property of the Association Pacific Island Legislatures. And of course, we welcome all of the island entities in the Blue Continent, you know, to use the term, promote the term, and so that, you know, we would get more people who want to explore the Blue Continent. Thank you again very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Senator Munya Barnes, you know, for the resolution and including me as well as a co-sponsor. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and Madam President of APIL. Senator Nicholas?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just real quick, I wanted to rise in full support of this resolution and talk a little bit about the significance of it. I believe that this is true visionary leadership coming from the author, Senator Munya Barnes, and the co-sponsor, our Speaker, Judy Wampat, in that we need to begin viewing our role here on Guam as the regional leader of all of Micronesia. And what that means is that in assuming that role, we need to do as much as we can to help our neighboring islands to develop. And we need to understand that their development is also going to help us develop. We always talk about compact impact. We talk about how when we have migrants coming to Guam and the impact that it has on our community is you know, it creates struggles. And sadly, this impact also has been leading to us having differences between our brothers and sisters in the neighboring islands, and that's not the way it has ever been historically, that's not the way it should be today, and that's not the way it should be in the future. What it should be is us helping our neighbors to develop, because when we help them to develop, we're going to minimize the outward migration of the residents because they're going to have more opportunities at home. Nobody wants to leave home for other opportunities, but they do when they must. And if we can help to create opportunities in these various neighboring islands that are our brothers and sisters here in Micronesia, if we can help them to develop, we're also going to help us to offset these compact issues by creating opportunities for people to stay home and find jobs there as well. And so I believe that this is true visionary leadership, because what it does is it sets that tone. It sets that tone with the cruise industry, it sets that tone with our tourism industries, and I believe that this is just the first step in many other opportunities that we can take to unite the entire region and to take the lead in helping our brothers and sisters in Palau, in Madro, in Ponape, to grow and develop. The FSM, the RMI, Palau, the CNMI even, Saipan, all of those neighboring islands that make up this blue continent that is specific to Micronesia, that's us. That's all of us. And the more we can help those areas develop, the more we're going to help the entire region to flourish, the more we're going to attract tourism to other islands that will jump onto the next plane to go to our island, and the more we're all going to benefit. So I very much rise in support of this resolution. I rise also in support of what it represents, and I hope that this is the first step in additional initiatives that are going to bring us closer together and help everybody to grow and improve their quality of life. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Nicholas. Any other senator wishing to speak on this resolution? If not, the chair invites the sponsor of this resolution to close. Senator Barnes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before I do a final closing, I'd like to just for the record include on the resolve clause that a copy be transmitted to our congressional delegate, Madeline C. Berdaliu, as there may be opportunity to engage with the folks from the United States as they have proven a very successful cruise industry. And if there's anything that they can do to assist, it would be good for us.
And will you consider the CNMI representative
Yes,
also?
yes,
Okay.
definitely, for both Congressional Delegate Madeline Z. Berdaliu and Congressional Delegate from the CNMI, Mr. Khalili.
Okay. On Senator Barnes's amendment to include those two individuals, no objections, so ordered. Senator Barnes, you're still recognized.
And Mr. Speaker, if I may, if I could just add for the record co-sponsorships of yourself, Senator Yamashita, the Vice Speaker, the Minority Leader, and Senator Mike Nicholas, who shared their support and said they desire to be co-sponsors.
Okay. On that amendment, there'd be no objections, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, thank you so very much. And in short, again, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Micronesian Cruise Association. They were just organized a couple of years ago. And I want to say, with their due diligence and their continued hard work, and a lot of it coming from the labor of love, I want to say that they've done very well. They continue to do so. For my colleagues who haven't seen the representation, Micronesian Cruise Association has submitted to this August body the updates of what is happening right now with MCA. But more importantly, when we look at the multiplier factor and what could be realized and the economic opportunities by diversifying our tourism market, now, Madam Speaker, I want to say that this will truly be a win, not just for our island, but also for our island brothers and sisters within this Pacific region who are part of the MISES and the APIL. More importantly, Madam Speaker, when we look at the hidden beauty, you talked about Namnadal. People talk about Palau also being one of the wonders with the jellyfish lake and with all the beauty, the rock islands that they have there, and how they call it a sea of lovers, and the beauty, the pristine, even here on our tropical paradise that we've been blessed with. People don't even realize that we have history of both World War I and World War II shipwrecks at the point of each other. And those diving enthusiasts who dive our islands always talk about the beauty. And a lot of our island people don't even know that that exists today. And when I was at that conference talking about Guam and Micronesia, and one of the itinerary planners saying, you know, Senator, if you were to come in, not as separate island countries, but as one island that blue continent that you were talking about and share your story, I'm telling you, you will be a great hit, because the beauty that you described to me is so awesome, and his enthusiasm was just, I guess, just by speaking to him, caught his eye, and he said that if you need to, it is a must that you work closely with, and it's opportunities like that cruise association, and one that's going to happen within the Asian Pacific region in October, that we have to be a part of that, so that we can start networking and integrating and collaborating, and all that operational framework has to be instilled, so that everyone here, all our brothers and sisters, will see that advantage and that opportunity for all our island nations. So again, I want to thank my colleagues who spoke in full support of that. I ask my other colleagues to please give this resolution a favorable consideration, and know that the work doesn't stop here. If this is passed by this August body, then I will continue to leave my sneakers on and start running to catch that bus. Sana maasi and si Diyos ang binidisi.
You're very welcome, Senators. On the motion to send Resolution 106 to the third reading file without any objections, so ordered. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a recess until 2 this afternoon. We are now in recess.